What's up, Otakus? How you guys doing? All right, we're coming right back with another top 10 list, and my ear's doing funky things right now. Um, I went on yesterday and did my top 20 comic book heroes list, and in that video, I said I'd be coming back with my next top 10 list, which was the top 10 X-Men books. Um, but uh, actually, that's not the case. We forgot to mention that um, the list we that was actually I was planning to do next would be top 10 villains because we covered the heroes. Now we're doing villains. So we're going to do villains first, then get to the top 10 X-Men books. And that's kind of how we'll roll. So this is, um, yeah, the next video that we're going to do is top 10 villains. And we're going to start off with a villain, I think. Um, as comic book fans, I think we were pretty excited during the whole build up to the Black Adam movie. Um, I mean, I really enjoyed Shazam, the first one. I didn't get to see the second one. Um, I don't know what the issues with the second one uh, are. I'm sure I'll see it at some point. But the first one I really liked. Um, they just kind of introduced Billy Batson and his little family of orphans. Um, really sort of establishes sort of a foundation for the Marvel family. Even though there's a little the different there's the details of that are different in the movie, but I really enjoyed it. And that movie came out, and then they announced, oh, Black Adam's coming, right? And they cast The Rock, who to me is just like, yeah, the I mean, that's like perfect casting right there. Hey, hey, look. Thank you for that design, by the way, Lok. I really appreciate. So, you know, um, Lok, he took the time to design like a logo um, for our channel, for Jeff and I's Double Dragon channel, and it looks really, really nice. And just wanted to thank you. I didn't get a chance to thank you you know, on any of our streams, but now that you're in the chat, yes, happy Thanksgiving. Um, Appreciate you're supporting this channel, and um, yeah, uh, love that the fact that you got on with Naman Young and you guys um, showcased your talents. Uh, Definitely appreciated that. All right, well, getting back to the top 10 villains, we're starting off with number 10, Black Adam. And as I was saying, Black Adam, I was really excited for Black Adam, I gotta say. Uh, you talk about like comic book characters, I mean, the really compelling ones, right? Black Adam kind of is there, because a good villain, like a good villain, is uh, complex, right? They're just not purely like just evil from the get go. There's something happens to them that makes them, um, that makes them turns them for the worse, right? And when you look at the origin stories of all these characters, um, they all carry sort of like their like something tragic happens to them, and they um, kind of rather than making the choice to be better, they succumb to um, making. their mission to bring misery to others, and that's kind of where Black Adam's origin lies as well. He's a well-meaning um, ruler, and then you know tragic things happen around his family, and he just becomes powerful. He seeks power, and then he becomes evil. Um, so yeah, when the movie bombed, and to be honest, I didn't think it was that bad of a movie. I'm not sure why it bombed like it did. It wasn't the greatest movie. Obviously, it wasn't the greatest movie. I think the story could have um, they could have set it up a little better in terms of the story. There were a few good scenes, but I just felt like it wasn't like here was a guy you were trying to kind of make out to be a good guy, but he was sort of a bad guy, but a good guy in the context of this appearance, and you know, it was they added too much, I think, complexity, and then um, they didn't really, you know, it should have had more context around his connection with Shazam, and I think it was just too sort of a standalone type movie, and not a good introduction into the this environment that I think people maybe didn't connect with. And you got to connect with a mass market audience, not just a comic book. Especially when you're introducing a character like this, right? Like not too many people are going to know about Black Adam. Um, they're not going to see the relevance, and then they bring the thing that would maybe compel people to go watch it at the very end with the Superman, cut scene, which was like the best part of the movie, to be honest. Like, we should have maybe got, I don't know. Yeah, I know if it had gotten to a second movie, we probably would have gotten it, but it just kind of fizzled out. We never got to see the Superman versus Black Adam versus Shazam. I'm sure Shazam would have integrated into that somehow as well, but it is what it is, and I just hope that DC doesn't give up on the character. But it looks like the character is just going to kind of take a rest for a while, um, until they have a chance to build up some of these other IPs, and I'm sure who knows if Shazam gets good footing in the DC EU, we'll probably see Black Adam. Um, but yeah, the cover that we are featuring is this beautiful black cover here by Alex Ross. Really one of my favorite covers in the collection. Such a great like rendering by Ross. Um, yeah, Faces of Evil. There you go. And yeah, he's not a good guy by any means. So um, I think that's that was sort of the challenge of bringing Black Adam to the screen. He was presented as this like kind of hero, um, you know, when in the comics he's quite the opposite, right? So he's I think kind of rectifying that in the public's mind. It's like, okay, he's a bad guy, but we're cheering for him. It's hard to rectify that in people's minds, right? So um, maybe that's a lesson learned for um, moving forward when you're dealing with characters like this. You can only assume so much that the public's going to know, even if you explain it to them in previews and within scenes and all that. It's just um, people need to be presented with a choice. am I rooting for this guy or am I rooting against this guy? And um, yeah, Black Adam was one of those weird ones where you were rooting for him, but then eventually when Superman shows up, who am I rooting for at the end of the day? You got to go for Soups. All right, number 9 is this is another character who's just you know full evil, but I think that, like all good evil or villains, he's got layers, and I think he sort of has a vision that is noble, but at the same time, you know, he kind of takes it to the extreme. And yeah, like anybody with a noble vision, when you take it to an extreme, or you use your power to enforce that vision upon others, um, it it's not it loses the the nobility, right? It becomes something other, and that's really the case with Apocalypse. I think Apocalypse is like, he whatever his good intentions were, they got lost behind this obsession with kind of bringing about an end to humanity. All right, Apocalypse, yes, and this is my really one of my favorite covers of Apocalypse, because this is how I imagine this is how he was introduced in the comics, and this is how I imagine Apocalypse with his four horsemen. Um, and introduced here on the cover by really one of the um, you know iconic artists at Marvel during my comic collecting era. That's Walt Simonson. Um, this is just a beautiful cover by Walt. Walt did a lot of work on X Factor, um, and yeah, I think he's got one of those styles. You either really like it or you don't. And I'm of the opinion I like it. So um, that is just, he's got Marvel Girl by the hair there. He got um, Archangel, by flying around with his metallic wings. This was just a crazy time uh, during this story arc, the fall of the mutants. So yeah, I could have gone with Mr. Sinister there as well. They're kind of like, but I think in terms of like when you compare Sinister and Apocalypse, who's the better villain? I think Apocalypse, because he has the more sort of demented vision for what he wants, he wants the world to be. Yeah, and yeah, in terms of this arc, he does have some great, you know, accomplices. It's not just him; he has a team of like mutants that are pretty powerful, and you know, I think that's kind of what made Apocalypse really uh, a great villain during these days. It's just like he um, had a strong team to counter X Factor and X Men. So that was always good. All right, this next one is really a villain. Let me give some context to my list. There's a lot of uh, villains I could have gone with, but most of the villains on this list were the villains that, again, during my comic collecting era, um, kind of were prominent. And this one definitely was introduced as I was collecting and had really one of the like just the biggest impacts from the get go a villain can have. And I'm referring to our friend Bane here. Bane just comes on the scene, all jacked up on, what did they call it? Venom juice or whatever. And he ultimately just fights with Batman, outpowers him, and breaks his back. And this is the Night Quest story, or Nightfall storyline, um, where they're really setting up Azrael to kind of take the mantle of Batman and just be this alternative Batman for a while. And Yeah, Azrael is this French. I don't know if he's French. I think he's like French American or something. He's got this French name, and um, he's got this bat suit that he gets. Right, it's like this kind of like he's like this cyborg Batman in the suit. And yeah, well, eventually Azrael, with the strategic help from like Bruce Wayne on how to counter when he goes out to seek vengeance. Um, yeah, defeats Bane pretty handily, and that's the end of that. Um, and then Bane, he continued to be like a villain in the Rogues Gallery, and I think um, what made Bane, I think, relevant again was the fact that when he appeared in the Nolan movies, in the last Nolan movie. I love that last Nolan movie. But obviously the Joker, Heath Ledger's appearance in the second Joker and that second movie. That's the best in the trilogy. But the third one is pretty strong too, and I think it's just a nice little. They wrap it up in a nice little bow with the retirement of Batman. He kind of you know rides off into the sunset with Selena, and yeah, kind of ends that whole. It was like a decade's worth of you know uh, movies, you know, but he kind of wraps that whole trilogy arc nicely. No, I'm referring to Nolan, but yeah, he gives us sort of this Bane, this interesting backstory where Bane is like Talia al Ghul's like savior out of the Lazarus pit, and like was a foot soldier or member of the League of Shadows, and like they built this really nice backstory in the movie around Bane. And Tom Hardy, right? Tom Hardy is the guy who plays Bane in that movie and does a brilliant job. He's absolutely terrifying as Bane because he makes Bane really like um, just hell bent on um, just you know uh, creating anarchy in our society and just ruling the city of Gotham and just not giving an F whether people live or die. And it was pretty uh, they made that character pretty intense. So I think, given where we are with the introduction of Bane during my comic book collecting era, and the fact that now he's sort of just well known through that trilogy as a baddie, a Batman, Um, in fact, I think they're planning to bring Bane back in a Deathstroke movie. Like I guess a baddie buddy movie with Deathstroke. I don't know how that's going to turn out, but um, hopefully they do a better job than Black Adam. Yeah, Batman's Doomsday, definitely. Yeah, if you compare the two '90s story arcs for those two characters, they're definitely long, sort of drawn out DC uh, crossover arcs with tying in multiple titles. Um, but yeah, uh, that was a great series, and I still think it is. Um, you know, it had uh, a lot of great artists that were working on that series. Good writing. Um, yeah, I think Chuck Nixon was one of the lead writers during that whole arc, and it was just um, really memorable. And not too many characters you can kind of like Doomsday's a great example, but Doomsday doesn't go very far. Um, Actually, Bane doesn't go very far either. He kind of comes on the scene really strong, creates this really iconic moment, like where he just really breaks the bat, literally breaks Bruce Wayne, and you know, almost like a decade later. Well, no, 2 decades later, right? Almost 2 decades later, we get that recreation on the big screen, which was pretty cool. Um, but yeah, it definitely think for a person like me who read the comic book and then watched the movie and all that, it cements Bane as definitely a villain, a top villain um, for the Dark Knight. All right, moving on. Um, I don't know about you, but this next character, because I love uh, the hero associated with this character so much, I just couldn't leave um, Victor off the list, and we're talking about Sabretooth. Um, Sabretooth is um, like Sabretooth has a weird introduction. He's introduced as this like kind of like this crazy like serial killer, right? Um, and then they somehow tie him in with Wolverine's backstory, and there's a lot of there's a lot of mystery around Wolverine's origin. There's a lot of mystery around Victor's origin. Um, but Victor plants in Logan's mind that, hey, I'm your father. And for a long time, like that's kind of like, well, is he or isn't he? And um, they share a history of serving as like agents in Canada. Um, and they have similar, they have the same healing factor. Um, and Sabretooth has like claws as well, like built into his actual like hands, like they're razor sharp claws. And he's just a bigger guy, Wolverine's smaller. Sabretooth is just like huge, right? He's like double the size of Wolverine. So like when they um it's kind of like when Wolverine fought Deadpool, right? You just kind of like they're just beating up on each other. There's no real winner because they just keep healing, right? And that's kind of what you get with Sabretooth as well, like just these long drawn out fights where they're just pummeling each other, and um, it kind of is made out in the comics that Sabretooth is a lot stronger and more like savage and kind of brutal. But yeah, just a great arch nemesis to Wolverine. So if you love the Wolverine series or just X-Men in general, there's Sabretooth with, whoever he's teaming up with at the time. And in the Uncanny X-Men, he was what part of uh, the I think they called it the Brotherhood of Mutants or whatever. Or sorry, yeah, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants or something. And he always showed up as one of the baddies there. Or was it the Marauders? Anyway, it was a team of like mutants, mutant bad people that was counter to the X-Men. And yeah, uh, great villain. Uh, I don't know what they're done with the character today. I think they killed him off or something. I don't know if he's still alive or around, but he will always be um, among the X-Men baddies. There's a lot of X-Men well, I don't want to say a lot, but for top 10 lists, we've got already two X-Men baddies that we've covered. So I mean, I think we might see one more before we're all said and done. Um, the next baddie is, um, what more can you say about this guy? He is Batman's, uh, I think, ultimate nemesis, but not always was that the case. I think it was really sort of like Batman the movie with Jack Nicholson's performance, then Heath Ledger. You have another great Joker in Heath Ledger, um, and of course, the fact that Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil made Joker sort of this crazy, kind of like psychopathic character, who just hell bent on, you know, being just psychotic against Batman's, crusade. And we get his origin in the Killing Joke. And, this is kind of where, here's this guy. He was a normal guy. He kind of gets uh, the short end the stick, having to like work because he's in a situation where he has to like feed his family and all that, and his young kids and family, and then he um, an accident where he falls into this like these chemicals, and he's altered, and it alters his uh, psyche as well, and he just goes crazy, right? um, and then there's also origins where he's the actual person that the thug, or where he kills Bruce's parents. So there's a lot of kind of lore around this character. At least that's what it's presented in the movie, and there are versions of the comics where it's like Joker's the person that was the thug, that low level thug that offed Bruce's parents, right? Um, all right, we're getting rad art and comics is list: Juggernaut, Omega Red, Sabretooth, Magneto, Goblin, Queen. Oh, Spiral Mojo. Yeah. That's good. Gore, Galactus. Yep. Magnus. Okay. Gore, huh? Interesting. I never read the Gore comics, but I'll take your word for that. Galactus, yeah, Galactus. I think, um, you know, I think when you get into the cosmic villains, it's um, you're talking about like just all powerful like beings and stuff. Which is cool, uh, because there's just this larger sort of universe that you're working with. You're talking about worlds, and but I think a lot of the villains I have here on my list are like grounded on Earth. They're kind of like more old school. Um, you know, they're not all powerful, and they're just kind of more on the human human side of, um, in terms of their scope of powers and all that. Um, but yeah, those are all great. Juggernaut's a great one. Yeah, he probably should have been on this list. Omega Red, yeah, Omega's Red is great. Um, Probably should have been on my list too, but I don't know. Omega Red, yeah, that's a tough one. Sabretooth for sure. I'm glad we both agree on Sabretooth, and that's a great list. All right, so Joker, yeah, and Joker's, he is, I don't know. For me, Heath Ledger's performance of the Joker, um, was, and I haven't watched the Joker, where Joaquin Phoenix's performance. Um, I, but like Joaquin plays a pretty convincing like crazy person. Um, so that's ultimately the role. Like you just got to be crazy. Um, but there's also an element, like I think you have to bring in, if you're playing Joker, you have to bring in sort of a comedic element, or at least like Ledger's performance is like, he is like, the Joker is like ironically funny. He's like terrifying, but he's also like, he's kind of like, why he's so serious. He's just this like oddball. Um, and there's a little bit of humor in that. But like you got to bring in Caesar Romero's like where the guy's laughing, he's just like he's um just this like goofy like uh clown almost, right? Just like he just can't take himself seriously to the point where it's like he's insane, right? So I think you gotta just bring in a guy who's like constantly like laughing and just being like, "Woo-hoo-hoo," like, and that's what I think, he kind of does that. He brings that like, he's obviously not like laughing all the time, but he kind of brings this like, ooh, like, he's making jokes, and um it's it's pretty funny. So I think you got to bring in an element of humor. Um, that's kind of what Jack Nicholson did, right? He just was like playing that goofy guy, um, while at the same time being, crazy and menacing at the same time. So I think it's a hard character to play. So it'll be interesting to see how they bring Joker into the Batman side of the DCEU. I know they have Penguin set up right now, and Colin Farrell looks like he's doing a great job of playing the Penguin character as like a gangsta, like a mob boss kind of, or somebody who works up through the mob ranks, right? Um, so yeah. Anyway, Joker's number 5 on our list. All right, let's see how many more we got. One, two, three, four, five. Yeah, we got 5 more. So, um, no, sorry, Joker's number 6 on my list. Number 5 on my list is, um, how to kind of say this without mm, I'm not a fan of Lex Luthor. Um, because I think being a fan of Superman, like I'm a fan of Superman, right? So when you're a fan of Superman, you can't look at his arch nemesis and be like, "Oh, I'm a fan of that guy," right? I love that character. No, it's kind of the opposite. Um, and first of all, Gene Hackman played an incredible uh, Lex Luthor, and Lex Luthor is able to figure out, like, in the context of the Superman movie, Lex Luthor is able to figure out Superman's weakness. He's able to lure him into a trap, essentially, and he's able to kind of leverage a plan where he's using, like, ballistic missiles to, like, create an earthquake and create all this havoc and chaos so that he financially benefits by destroying sort of the the high valued real estate where people live and the infrastructure is, right. He buys all this, like, worthless desert land, thinking, like, if I destroy the good land, people will eventually have to move to where the good land, the only land exists. And I always looked at that Gene Hackman character and be like, man, that's like, first of all, he doesn't have any powers, right? He's just using sort of his, like, um, corporate intellect, or I guess you could say, like, um, this is what how you would think, like, evil corporate overlords would do. Like, I want to make a profit, right? It's all about profits, and I could care less about people's well being. Um, you know, that kind of character. So he's just really not likable. Um, but then, you peel back the comic book origin of this character, and there's, Lex Luthor goes through very, different. He's first introduced as just like this bad guy, um, like a smart rich dude who's just out to. He doesn't like that Superman's, like, doing all these good deeds. He's kind of like, um, just hell bent on getting rid of Superman, right? Um, but then, they introduce the sort of the origin story of his, like, baldness. Why is this guy bald? You know, Back in Smallville, uh, Lex and Clark were friends, and Lex was sort of like this smart, sort of genius, science genius, and he's doing experiments in his house, and his house catches fire. Superboy comes and puts the fire out with his breath, and the chemicals in the air destroy Lex's hair. His hair falls out and becomes bald. And that, from that day forward, that young Lex says, "I'm going to dedicate my life to destroying you someday. Using my intellect and all this to destroy you." And that's really kind of like how the Lex character kind of plays out throughout the arc of Superman, like his appearances. He's this sort of just this, like, mad genius who comes up with all these little weapons or plots, and he knows all of, like, Superman's secrets and weaknesses. Superman only has a series of weaknesses. Actually, I'm sure he has more, but the ones that come top of mind is, he can't see through lead. He needs sunlight, right? He needs the power. He's powered by the rays of the yellow sun. Um, so red rays of the sun, or like a red sun, would weaken him. Kryptonite, different shades of kryptonite would weaken him or alter him, and yeah, things like that, right? But Luther's always kind of like figuring stuff like that out, developing. technology or you know anyway, he's always kind of got the upper hand because he's got resources, and he always kind of hides behind this like, oh, I'm kind of like, I'm on your side, I'm your friend, but at the same time I'm not, like, he's kind of playing uh, the two sides of the coin with the Clark character and Superman. So again, that's all to say that he wasn't a very compelling villain. He's just, he's kind of like the, okay, he's up to his little old antics again, and then Superman's going to figure it out and, you know, uh, subdue him, right? Like put him in his place or all that. And that's just like it becomes campy after a while. And it wouldn't be until like around this period um, where Lex starts to like, again, he gets this suit. He's starting to use more like technology and, you know, like a powered suit to kind of compete. He's always had his intellect, right? The intellect part has always been there. But then he like teams up with like Brainiac. He creates in the cartoons, he creates the Legion to Doom, right? He's the leader of that. Uh, so he's like leveraging not just himself, but he's leveraging his brain to bring evil forces together and team up to beat, the Justice League and to beat Superman. So I think his character gets a little bit more compelling and stronger in terms of, countering somebody like Superman who's smart and powerful and all that. Um, so yeah, and that's kind of where we are. And what I think where Lex probably had his best days in pop culture is on uh, the Smallville uh, series, television series, and in that series, Clark's played by Tom Welling, and Lex is played by oh man, I'm gonna forget their actor's name. He's a great actor. Uh, if you know in the chat, shout it out. Um, oh, it's gonna bug me now. I gotta look it up. Anyway, the guy who plays Lex is brilliant, and my apologies to the actor for forgetting his name. I'm looking it up right now. It is Michael Rosenbaum. Michael Rosenbaum uh, plays Lex, uh, plays the ultimate character of Lex. I think, as great as Gene Hackman was and whatnot, like brings that complexity I was talking about for a character, right? If you just make a guy like switch on, okay, like I was good, I'm smart, something happens to me, and now I'm just like hell bent on being evil and all that. It you know, that that kind of rings true for a little bit, but you kind of need more. And in the Smallville series, yes, they make this sort of meteor event where Clark comes to Earth, and in that meteor event, there's an accident where Lex again, like radiation from the meteors and all that, like make his hair fall out. So he's bald from a very young age. Michael Rosenbaum, thank you. And you know, that kind of anyway, it builds some like he's a kid that's had it rough. Obviously, he's probably spent a lot of time alone, and he's got this really evil dad, right? He's got this corporate, like just what we were talking about, like guy who doesn't care about Smallville or anything. He just cares about growing his empire in terms of business empire. And he teaches Lex all the wrong thing, and he makes Lex a very smart, savvy business person. But he also you know, pours the worst values into Lex, and Lex is resistant to that. Lex is still sort of like, hey, I like guys like Clark. I like people, like I'm trying to do the right thing. And then there's always that sort of like, well, he's also really interested in finding out about Clark's secrets. He's kind of in with his dad on a lot of these like plans for, harnessing like Kryptonian technology to advance it for their own well-being and all that. And he's power hungry, and then so he evolves from this like somebody who's Clark's friend, genuinely like befriends Clark and wants to be friends, and then turns into a rival with Lana kind of get in the middle there, and then yeah, starts to go full on evil toward the latter part of the series, and then they, for whatever reasons, they kill him off the show, write him off the show, which is at the point I think where I just kind of lost interest. Like Lana was off the show, like Lex was not. They just lost the core, and then they're just focusing on Lois and Clark's little romance and all that, which is fine. And I'm glad it ends with them, Clark kind of moving to Metropolis, being the reporter, and transitioning to being Superman, and all that. It ended like it should, I guess. But I just wish that core cast of characters could have stayed. But you eventually knew Lana was going to get out of the picture when Lois popped up, and then I don't know what the reasons for writing Lex off, but you just couldn't have Lex be evil for that long without some kind of intervention. So eventually he gets destroyed as well, which changed the tone of the show, right? Just like, there's no like Luther plotting against the town and the larger the larger society. Um, but yeah, I think there's a lot of potential with a character like Lex, somebody who works from the shadows, not necessarily direct, right? They're just working from the shadows, um, kind of using his friendship with Clark and you know this sort of his status as like a honorable businessman in the community, somebody who's like maybe philanthropic and using this sort of again Lionel Luther in Smallville. If you were to just give him the mantle of Lex in whatever iteration that we're going to see in the DCEU, I think that would work, right? Just a guy who's like um, says all the right things in public, but he's secretly plotting to destroy Superman and take over the world and all that. Um, and there's this great cover um, where Lex is he's it's the Donald Trump what is the Donald Trump's autobiography called, the art of the art of the deal, right? It's the art of the deal cover with Lex Luthor on it, and it's just hilarious because it just in the context of where we are now politically, it it rings true. Anyway, but yeah, and that's saying a lot about Trump. The fact that he's Lex Luthor says a lot about Trump because Lex Luthor is, uh, you know, again, I think there's a lot of potential around Lex Luthor. Will probably be presented with um, a really fascinating version of him in the upcoming movie. All right, we're now moving on to number four. And number four, I think, going to surprise a lot of people, except for the fact that if you watch my last list, there's a character on there, and I spoke about that character and his nemesis. And so when I reveal it, you won't be as surprised if you watch the last list. But this list, we are talking about um, Storm Shadow, uh, Tommy from the GI Joe comics. Now, Tommy's a is a hero. Okay, he's a Vietnam vet. He saves Snake Eyes' life during the war, or actually, no, Snake Eyes saves his life during the war, and then he returns the favor and saves Snake Eyes' life. And they have this sort of blood brother bond where he invites Snake Eyes to train with him, join his ninja clan. Um, and then uh, a series of assassins kill Tommy's master, and they make it look like Snake Eyes did it. So Tommy thinks Snake Eyes kills his master, and then he basically goes bonkers and swears off Snake Eyes and says, I'm gonna kill you," and they aren't friends anymore. And um, this drives, I guess, the rage and the uh, desire for vengeance drive Tommy to Cobra, and he joins Cobra as like Cobra's sort of bodyguard slash, you know, uh, in the cartoon they make Storm Shadow really like they make him strong, right? They make him strong. He's like a ninja. He's able to like make GI Joes plural Joe's lives kind of miserable. But he always had this weird like kind of like white dude doing an Asian voice kind of accent, which was just annoying. And they made him super like shady. They like his character in the comic books is just so much more compelling than this like wimpy kind of like cowardly Cobra fighter, in the cartoon. So yeah, he was not like I know he was still a favorite in the cartoons because he was the ninja, right? But he wasn't like a very compelling villain in the cartoons. So for those of you who are GI Joe fans and you're reading the comics, you obviously wanted to see more of the comic version of the character because the comic version of the character is like the guy who can like beat up any Joe basically. He can basically take down, infiltrate a base unseen. He can take down you know any number of Joes and get out without being detected and all that. So he's just this really um, kind of powerful force for Cobra. But yeah, he's definitely one of my favorite characters, villains. And I don't really even consider him a villain. I just kind of consider him like, one of those like anti-heroes, I guess. Just he kind of think um, I don't know if it ever gets revealed to him that Snake Eyes wasn't the killer, if he ever finds the killers of his masters. But um, that's another thing. Lee, oh, what's his name? The Korean actor Lee. Anyway, his surname's Lee. Lee plays a great GI Joe in the movie, which was like what, a decade ago almost. That was a great portrayal of Storm Shadow. You know, um, a guy who just like kicks ass and like you know kind of um, yeah, he's the guy you kind of fear on that team, on the bad team, right? So um, but yeah, he's definitely sort of this character who's very powerful. That's kind of cool, who can. And when you have a powerful enemy like that, it just makes the story is so much more compelling because you just don't know, how things are going to turn out. It's not like Superman can come in and just be like, ha ha ha, like, let me just flick you with my finger and be done with you. No, no, like Storm Shadow could wreck stuff up. You know what I mean? So it's always nice to have a, yeah, Storm Shadow type, Storm Shadow esque character. It's compelling. All right, we're down to the top three, and I think these three villains are just, if you're going to build a Hall of Fame of villains, obviously all these villains you could just kind of, I guess, nominate for that. But these three are probably in the Hall of Fame of most people's lists. And we're number three is Doctor Doom and Victor Von Doom, another character who just had a bad thing happen to him. His family is killed, and he's another one of these like super intelligent people who um, take the tragedy and then plot to do bad things, use his intelligence to do destroy rather than create and all that. So, um, Doom's started off in Fantastic Four as sort of the arch nemesis to Reed Richards. There's a kind of a resentment there because Reed was sort of like the more, I guess, popular person or just more recognized for his intelligence and achievements. But yeah, Doom gets into this freak accident. He's marred. He has to wear this like metallic suit, but also there's, draws a lot of power. Um, and yeah, he just becomes this sort of force, very strong with the kinds of powers he attains. And he ultimately is like like, if we were looking at the Secret Wars arcs, right? He's the person who bests the Beyonder, gains all of those like cosmic powers in the first one, and then in the second one, he somehow bests everybody to, win the multi or the singular timeline where he's becomes like just a godlike entity. Um, so all these things like, and then they announced, that Robert Downey Jr. would be playing Doom. So they're building a lot of hype around uh, Doom. They got ultimately like the A-list foundation of the Marvel Cinematic Universe A-lister to play the big baddie in this one. So I'm going to be interested to see how they make that happen. Like, you know, people who have eyes. I doubt they'd make him Tony Stark playing Doom. I think it will be one of those things where like they'll keep him behind the mask and he'll just be playing the Doom character. It'll be like Robert Downey Jr. was Iron Man and Robert Downey Jr. is playing Doom. They're unrelated. Um, I know there's in the comic books they have some kind of, I guess, storyline where it is Iron Man who dons the mantle of Doom. I just don't think that would be. I don't know. I just don't think that would be a good. I think it should just be separate, right? Just bring Doom in and make him Doom, and Robert Downey Jr. can play him, and he'd probably play a great Doom. But give him the the Doom characteristic. Don't make him like Tony Stark playing Doom, please, please, for the love of comic books. do not do that. All right. So Doom, yeah, Doom is. We've yet to see a really compelling Doom on the big screen. Um, Doom up until well, all the Fantastic Four movies up to this point been disappointing, but I think in the last one they brought um, they tried to like weave Doom into that one, and it was awful. And again, I think a lot of the it has to do with the design of the suit, really creating the complex backstory of Doom as well. You just can't make him like university buddies, and then all of a sudden he just goes crazy and like is hell bent on. No, there's more complexity there, and you gotta figure out a way to weave that in intelligently, um, or at least for the mass market to buy into it. Just can't be this like switch you flip and like, oh, he's bad now. He got scarred, so he's obviously going to want to destroy the world, right? He's just ugly, and that's what ugly people do. No, it's not that simple, right? So, kind of a challenge. All right, number two on my list, and this is a villain. I mean, you talk about my comic collecting era. You talk about just having that complex backstory where he's probably a good guy on most days, right? He's got this sort of noble vision and goal uh, for protecting his kind, but that taken too far, it's it loses its nobility, especially when you lose sight of like um, where that red line, where that moral line stands, right? And for Charles Xavier, that moral line is very clear and distinct, where that the mutants are here to protect everybody, and show people, there's nothing to fear, like kind of like the Martin Luther King of the mutants versus like Malcolm X, who's like, no, we're gonna take power and create our own destiny. Um, and we clearly have an enemy, right? They like to work with the enemy is stupid, right? And that's kind of where Magneto falls. And mind you, Magneto is very powerful. He's Omega level mutant, right? I mean, look what he's doing here. He's just like just molding this like metal prison for everybody, and um, yeah, I think cinematically, they've done some great things with Magneto, where he's just like kind of ripping apart like stadiums and um, just like taking like the Golden Gate Bridge and like just like collapsing it. And what I mean, they just like these like strong visual representations of his uh, ability to control magnetism. Um, pretty cool. Um, and also, they definitely where he's getting all this is because of he's a Holocaust survivor, right? He survived um, really one of the most evil things I think human beings. You talk about like you talk about slavery. You're talking about Americans who also did things on that scale for hundreds of years, like just making people like property, like keeping them enslaved, giving them absolutely like no rights or freedoms in a country that you know purports to be like you know stand for freedom, stand for every man, woman, and child has rights, inalienable rights, and it's this huge double standard, right? That was the history of this country for many, many years. So when you're talking about like Nazis, you're talking about American slavery, you're talking about just like horrendous things that human beings have done to other human beings. And all of these things um, weren't that far off from like modern history, right? Sadly. But yeah, that's the great thing about Magneto. It's like there are still Holocaust survivors among us. They're not, um, their numbers are dwindling, but it's still, um, there are people that have survived that tragedy. And, the fact that they brought a character like that to the comics in this sort of larger theme of like, hey, let's not, you know, this discrimination against, really, it's, homo superior, right? It's a different, it's not, they're not humans, they're the evolution of humans, the next species of humans, and this discrimination, that this fear and hatred and discrimination of the mutants is really a parallel to uh, racism and discrimination within this country, right? It's kind of like drawing that parallel in comic books. Very powerful, when I was um, reading this as a kid, and obviously it's carried over to today's stories. I think X-Men still, um, has that through line, um, and then you have the two different styles, um, or visions, I should say. You have Charles's vision versus Magneto's vision. And Magneto's always kind of been like, you know, f the other side. We're gonna protect our own, and that's a very sort of compelling way to approach leadership. I think it's kind of like he's taking it a very tactical approach. Like, these people are not our friends, so why are we trying to like, why don't we treat them what they are, right? Like the enemy, right? And then whereas Charles is saying, no, 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 it's not all. You can't condemn um, an entire species for the decisions of a few. And so therein lies that conflict, and therein lies what makes, I think, Magneto cool or compelling. I shouldn't say cool, because like when all is said and done, even like if you're kind of rooting for humanity and mutanthood to be living in harmony, then this is not the guy you want to root for. But you can also understand like where he's coming from. It's pretty. Uh, it's a hard thing to integrate into a villain, and so Claremont did that beautifully, brilliantly, brilliantly. Which is why I think Claremont he's the X Men guy. Claremont there will never be, I mean, a writer of the X Men, because he basically created that entire lore, right? When he came on and just re-established the X Men with the new characters, and just developed Magneto. He didn't create Magneto, but he developed him and created this whole sort of us versus them, kind of that duality of sort of approaches to leadership, or a political, yeah, if you're playing like a political chess match, there's two approaches, good cop bad cop kind of approach. And just beautifully written and played out over the years. Um, Claremont's, I mean, what can you say? He basically is the X Men. He's the guy. He's the mind behind uh, creating the our modern concept of the X Men. All right, my favorite villain is kind of personifies everything I've talked about. Um, a bit of he's intelligent. He's a little off in terms of his. He's mad. Like when you say mad scientist, he's this. Octavius is definitely the personification of mad scientist for sure. Um, but it really revolves around the design of this character, which is what I mean, he hasn't. The design of this character has not changed one iota, and yet they continue to find ways. I shouldn't say find ways because there's only really been one representation of Doc Ock, um, the one that from the Tobey Maguire movies that just recently made an appearance again in the last Spider-Man movie. But then we got the female Doc Ock character in the Spider Verse, just kind of the same concept, except it's a woman rather than some middle-aged dude with a bowl cut. Um, but yeah, I mean, what can you say about Doc Ock? He's just this fun villain. When he when he comes to town, he's gonna wreck shit up and get in your face and uh, find a way to subdue Spider-Man. And bring Spider-Man to his knees, and then it's a pretty like it's a motif, and like you know something happens, and Spider-Man always gets the best of Doc Ock and sends him to jail, and it's just like it kind of replays itself over and over, but it's still it's good stuff, right? And Doc Ock is always going to be within the context of. I mean, I know he was like one of the baddies in the Secret Wars arc. They brought him in, and he's very powerful. He can kind of like his these arms are very strong. They can like destroy buildings. They can throw cars. They're just very strong mechanic, and they make him super agile, right? As agile as Spider-Man. So um, I always like appreciated about that. Like when you see him kind of doing stuff in the comic books in the frames, you see that movement. You see the power of his arms and the super control that he has, right? But yeah, they make him crazy. They basically make him crazy, and always kinds of his short-sightedness always kind of backfires on him at some point. But yeah, this is a great cover here. Classic John Romita Senior comic. So glad I have this book. It's one of my favorite covers. Spidey joins Doc Ock. Daily Bugle. And yeah, that's my favorite villain. And you can call it what it is, but Doc Ock has always been my favorite villain. Um, Almost more so than Spider-Man. You kind of like when Doc Ock makes an appearance, you kind of like want him to win. Like you don't want to see Spider-Man necessarily save the day. You kind of want to see Doc Ock, kind of do create his havoc and um, get the best of Spider-Man, and then make moves on May, and just kind of you just kind of want to see all that play out because he's just like chaos he's chaos on on four legs, essentially four metallic arm legs type stuff. So um, great stuff. Yeah, great stuff. Um, and that's my top 10 list of villains. So hope you guys enjoyed that list. I had fun kind of talking through all these like characters. Let me know in the comments who are some of your favorite characters. Hopefully, we overlap on a few of them. If not, there's just so many great villains out there. I mean, first of all, I personally didn't include villains like Darth Vader or Darth Maul, the Star Wars villains, because I won't really don't see Star Wars villains as quote unquote comic villains. Those were characters introduced in film and made their way to comics. And technically, I should have done that with the Transformers because I had Optimus Prime on that list. Um, but you know, it is what it is. I consider still Optimus Prime a comic book character because the company that created the cartoons was Marvel, right? Marvel was the brainchild behind the animation studio, even though technically the toys were from a series in Japan that had nothing to do with Transformers. They were just robots that transformed into everyday things. But they brought that toy line and they said, hey, we got to sell these in the US. Let's make a whole story around them. And who did they come to build that story? It was like the people at Marvel Comics. So it technically it is a comic book character. Um, so that's what made why I put Transformers on the list versus like Star Wars villains. Because if you're talking about Star Wars villains, I mean Vader, Boba Fett, these guys are just like would be on this list for sure. It's just I don't consider Star Wars characters like comic book villains. They're just villains from film. So that's the logic behind that. But there's so many great villains. I mean, could have gone with. I'm just trying to think of some other villains that could have made this list. Could have gone with like, yeah, I mean, Hush. You could have gone with Poison Ivy. You could have gone with. Um, I'm trying to think. Like, yeah, Mr. Sinister, Juggernaut. Could have gone with Green Goblin. I mean, there's just so many to great villains out there. Even in the Superman realm, you could have gone with, uh, you know, Doomsday. You could have gone with Darkseid. Could have gone with um, trying to think, Bizarro. Even yeah, Bizarro counts as a villain, right? I mean, Bizarro's just one of those things. Like he's just dumb, not necessarily a bad guy, but there are times when he comes and he's like, there have been iterations of him where he's been super bad. Um, but yeah, you always need a good villain, and a good villain could be like just a one-off. Like Hush, I think is a great example. Like Hush, great, great intro, but and we've seen him a couple times here and there. The Court of Owls is another great example. They get this great introduction, then they're not really kind of present, kind of like fade off. So you kind of need more like you just can't have like a one and done kind of story arc. You kind of need them to kind of make their ways back, and that's what's the great thing about this Hush sequel that's coming. Jeff Loeb's bringing, like that'd be just great to see Hush get more established. I know there's rumors he might be coming in the Matt Reeves Batman as the next villain. I think they are leaning toward the Joker though. I think most people want to see Joker. But Deathstroke's another great one, right? Deathstroke's another great villain that you'd like want to see. Um, who else? The Brood. They're kind of like the aliens in the X Men. Um, I mean, they're like Harley Quinn. Did I mention Harley Quinn? Yeah, you want to see, a lot of people love Harley Quinn. Um, Starro. Starro's another great villain. Uh, you know, Cheetah, I guess, on Wonder Woman's nemesis side. Or who's the Ares, right? Ares is the sort of the baddie of the gods and all that. Um, just a bunch. So yeah, let me know in the comments. It's hard to really like these are the for me, you know, these are the ones that come like straight to mind when we put this list together. I was like, yeah, this guy's got to be on the list, or this villain has to be on the list, because they're just for me like they're the ones that growing up reading comics had the most impact like on me like as like wow this villain is pretty pretty cool. I think you got to get a cool, not that it has to be cool, because there can be villains where you're like, oh man, that's just straight up ill, and you don't want to. You want the good guy to win in that situation, but they're also again the comp. I think I'm more for the complex villains, right? Villains that um, you know, for whatever reason, there's still like some humanity there that's just been twisted, which is makes them more real. I think they're just like absolute monsters, no soul. Just you know, it's when you kind of write them off as like okay, one dimensional and um, not a lot of substance there, and you know. Yeah, and that's a good way to look at Doomsday, right? Doomsday just comes in, he's just this brute force, and he's just bad. He can't be reasoned with. There's no sense around his origin. There's no rhyme or reason to that thing. That thing is just hell bent on destroying Superman, right? So it's pretty. That's a good example of like one dimensional type villains that are still, I guess, um, a force to be dealt with. But yeah, I think of all these like characters, I think the one with the most like compelling backstory is still, I think, Magneto, right? Magneto is just brilliantly written and concocted. Um, and I just love that the fact that the X Men animated series is just so popular. Really hope season two knocks it out of the park again. From what we've seen from season one, they did a spectacular job. I know they don't have the same kind of writing and you know they don't have the same writing team or what's the word I'm looking for. They don't have the same like producer, the producing team for that content. Um, for season two, but hopefully that doesn't. I hopefully what they built in season one is still um, the beacon with which they build season two, and so if they're going down that rabbit hole, we're going to get into some pretty compelling story arcs here. I think potential to see like the Age of Apocalypse, potential to see the Onslaught storyline, but whatever we see, hopefully it continues to kind of maintain that tone and thoughtfulness that fans are appreciating. All right, well, yeah, this was sort of a fun top 10 list to do. The next one will be top 10 X-Men books in my collection. I should say covers, top 10 X-Men covers. And or yeah, kind of books slash covers, I guess, in the instances where, maybe their first appearances or something um, relevant that's happening in the book will cover it. But it'll most likely just be like more on just the best overall books, whether they're covers or whether they're stories. They'll be significant kind of books. I tend to give significance to the great artwork in my collection, so it'll probably be more art focused selections for that list. But yeah, we'll see. Kind of have it drafted already, so we should be getting to that. So, but in the meantime, tomorrow's Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, guys. Hope no one has power outages or anything. No disruptions to your time with loved ones. Um, if you are, not able to meet up with loved ones, or if you're working or whatever, the holiday season is um, more solitary than with others. Um, hope you have a restful and you know uh, a reflective time on during this period, because it is just a time to reflect on what you have. And so hopefully uh, that kind of reflection just prepares you to give the very next year, uh, your best, your all. uh, and yeah, um, really just in Japanese we say gambaro. It's like do your best. It's kind of like just you know do your best. That's pretty much the translation. Just like go out there and give it your all. Gambatte is kind of what we'd say. So, yeah, hopefully you guys uh, have good Thanksgiving and the rest of the holiday season. And again, join me and Jeff this Saturday. We're going to be going live. I think we're planning on doing an artist feature, so that should be fun. But yeah, we'll see you on Saturday as well. So um, continue to kind of visit and see what's going on my channel. And adios. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.